So tonight I have recorded the sonata in C minor, opus 17 number 2 by Christian Bach. And besides some general ideas on the life of Christian Bach, we're going to dive into this work. That's coming up. So welcome to a new episode of Afterthoughts. My name is Wim Winters, and as I said, tonight I have recorded this C minor sonata of Christian Bach. With the middle section. And last part. So, if you Google Christian Bach, you will be surprised, or maybe not surprised, that you don't find too much about him. And that's strange, because he was considered in the 18th century, certainly by people like Mozart, as one of the greatest composers of all time. And secondly, if you consider the whole family of Bach as one family, which it actually was, and you start with Father Bach, who was of course much in the Baroque, in what we call learned counterpoint. So before 1750, then you had Friedemann Bach, which was considered to be one of the finest organists of his time. Didn't compose too much, but really mastered the two styles. Emanuel Bach, the same thing, but he opened the way to a complete new style, the Empfindsamkeit. And Christian Bach, who was born actually only in 1735, when his father was already 50 years old, and had lessons with J.S.Bach, and later after that, after his father died, moved to Berlin to Emanuel Bach, and had 4 years lessons from Emanuel Bach. And his work represents actually what we would call the Gallant style, like music of the Viennese classical style. So he opened actually the way to that style. Emanuel Bach is somewhere in between. Then you had Father Bach, Friedemann Bach. So this complete family covers almost all musical aspects of the 18th century. And so it's a little bit surprising that there's not so much to be found on the internet. And actually the books I own, there's little that I can look up for you to tell on Christian Bach. For me personal, I've told you before that J.S.Bach is main composer of my life as an organist and keyboard player, and that I in fast tempo start to explore the music of C.P.E. Bach, and will dive into his theoretical writings as well. And Christian Bach is really on the sideline from my musical perspective. And I've done one sonata before, I think it's the opus 17 number 5 in A major, which actually is a piece that if I play that on concert is always a tremendous success, because people like that. And actually the reason that I play this opus 17 number 2 tonight, partly the reason is that Anja, my wife, asked for a long time to do another Christian Bach. So it's music that really works well with the general public, and in that time it was very popular as well. So Christian Bach moved to Italy. He became organist. There's some things on Wikipedia you can read. He became organist in Milan Cathedral, and then he returned to London in 1762 and went into the service of Queen Charlotte. So in 1763 Mozart visited him, and actually his music was very popular until 1770. If people who write on Wikipedia are right, I cannot check that. So in any case, he died in 1782 and seriously in debt. So he made some misinvestments, and actually Queen Charlotte had to pay for everything that he was in debt for, and gave his widow a widow pension. So why don't we find more on Christian Bach? Even in edition, I've looked it up. There's apparently one edition made by Garland Publishers in 1804 to 1999 in 48 volumes, so you can imagine what Christian Bach has composed. And actually, if I go to the website of Garland Publisher, there is no link anymore to this publication, You can find some threads to libraries, of course, but to buy this publication, I didn't find a link. So if you have more information on that, please share it, because it's of interest, of course. So it's hard to imagine that a 48-volume publication would go out of print so fast. The only thing that I can imagine is that it wasn't a very big success as a publication, since Christian Bach is a composer that I think many musicians just do not take seriously or just left to the sideline. So having said all that, I would like to go with you in this Afterthoughts, in the playing session, so to say, playing part, to the third part. Maybe just giving you some moments of a really Mozart-like feel in the second movement, the beginning, for instance. Could be Haydn. So that is very beautiful. You're beautiful. This could have come right out of the Sonata of Mozart of Haydn. Really, that's great music. And then the last part, the prestissimo. I'll choose this piece for this Afterthought, this part, because it shares a notation with another famous piece, and I will show you in a minute. I just play some bars. So it's prestissimo 12/8. I will have the score up. I'm playing from an old Peters edition, which is on the Petrucci library. I will share the link also in the description box. And goes on, and then it continues here. And then a very gorgeous passage actually. Before we compare this with the other composer and the other piece that I mentioned, as most of these Afterthoughts are personal reflections, that's just between brackets. A good friend of mine sent an email asking if the things I was saying on the Württemberg Sonata, notation-wise, so the notation of the Württemberg Sonata, if that was something that I could relate to a certain source, or that just was me giving an interpretation. And I replied, actually, it was a very good question. These Afterthoughts, they reflect my personal way of working. And in that regard, for instance, for the notation of the Württemberg Sonata, it's what I have read throughout all my life, actually, and combine it in my... So I mix it all together, and that's how I interpret the music and the notation. So I wouldn't say that it doesn't reflect any source, but I wouldn't be able to point to a specific source where I could prove, so to say, that what I'm saying is right. And I'm not interested in pointing towards a source that can prove what I'm saying. I'm just giving you my personal reflections, my personal daily interpretations, and that's something I share with you. So, to which piece I would compare this, and I have actually the score here, And it was to my surprise, because I was playing it and I thought, this is exactly the same notation as Beethoven's first sonata, last movement. So the F minor sonata, the recording that I made on YouTube. It's prestissimo, it's a C with a line, so it's the alla breve sign, but it's not an alla breve in the old sense. And then you have in Christian Bach 12/8, which is also 4/4 actually, and I think I can relate that to a source. I think it's Kirnberger who writes about this, that the 12/8 is to be considered as the fastest 8-value bar structure, if that's correct English. So you can compare it with a 4/4 bar structure, and you apply that just to avoid having to note all triplets. So that's what I think Kirnberger is writing. So the bar structure is the same. It's both indicated prestissimo, and I didn't check the tempi, but actually I played both parts in about the same tempo, just coincidentally. It's even the same mood, and that's interesting, because also to me, and I'm just sharing this experience with you, not to prove that I'm right or wrong, that's not what I meant to do, but just that I'm convinced that these notation questions were important and were very simple at the same time. And if Christian Bach writes a prestissimo in this kind of notation, and Beethoven applies a prestissimo in that kind of notation, which is very similar, that both tempo choices should reflect one another. And so if you would have a very different tempo choice in Christian Bach than Beethoven, then there is something that needs explanation, because why would they? I can imagine that there are differences locally, but Christian Bach linked to the work of J.S.Bach, Emanuel Bach, Beethoven, much influenced by the work of Emanuel Bach. So that's it. You can speak of a general attitude, actually general idea on notation. If you would go to France or to Italy, even then, but then you have a different tradition, but here is the same. So for those of you who knew the work of Christian Bach before, I hope you liked the performance and some elements. And for those of you who didn't know the work of Christian Bach, that it can be and give an impulse to dive more into his music and just discover, I think, many works of beauty. And we certainly will do some more Christian Bach in the future. So I thank you for watching, I thank you for sharing and subscribing to the channel as always. If you want to stay updated on all projects, there's a link below to opt in for the newsletter. You get a free MP3 of my version of the inventions on top of that. And we see each other next time again. Bye!